Hi, everyone. Is it loud enough? Is it too loud? It's good, okay. I think I'm not gonna do the presentation actually. I think I'm just gonna ask you questions. I think it's more important to talk about blockchain voting rather than my own business, since we're in Catalonia, especially this week. It's an important week for you guys. So very, very quickly about the business, but literally like 30 seconds. So I'm Leonardo. I'm the CEO of this Swiss-based protocol and voting technology. Basically, it's a blockchain infrastructure that we built from scratch that came out from the decentralized and distributed system lab of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology like 5 years ago. It's like the OS or iOS of your phone, on top of which you can build many decentralized apps. And one of the decentralized apps that we built enables people to vote remotely. So it shuffle votes, it anonymizes the vote, and then send them to the blockchain, to our blockchain. So why our blockchain? I will explain this later. But basically, this is what we do. But we don't only do that. We also do supply chain solutions. We work with the guys of Onfido and other IT providers to identify the voters. And all this happens on our infrastructure. And basically, the goal of the entire infrastructure is to make the voting system safer, cheaper, faster, and as transparent as we can. So that's what we do. So it's basically like Ethereum, but for the purpose of voting. That's it. So I have some questions here, but I think I'm going to answer the questions later. I don't know if you guys, Yasmin, if you have the microphone, I don't know if you guys want to know, I don't know, something about blockchain voting. What would be the question that you have for me about blockchain voting, if you had any? Sir? No. Yeah, please.
I think this might, oh, there you go.
It works, yeah.
That was a good delivery. So I've lost my voice entirely here in Barcelona, and not because I'm protesting. Is your platform mostly for government-type voting or corporate, or DAO, or what's the target audience?
It's both. Actually, maybe here I can take the slide that talk about the market. Okay, so we do both. Obviously, what's more interesting for me and for the team, and I think which has more value, it's the public sector. So we try to help governments. It can be like small-scale election, can be big-size elections, but we basically want to help governments to have a more organic communication with their people. But we also help the private sector, like shareholder meetings, for example, banks or institutions. If you have Goldman Sachs who want to organize in Nevada with their employee voting or a survey, we can do that. We're organizing a survey with the UN in 3 weeks. It's basically the joint inspection unit who will ask all the organization of the UN. So it's WIPO, it's the health organization, the meteorology organization, the commerce organization. A few questions, and then we will do that on our subdomain, and they can check the Blockchain Explorer and see that their vote were sent and casted. It's both private and public sector. Here you have the numbers. I think the size of the industry right now is more or less 0.2% of the world GDP. It's a massive business with like 4 or 5 big players. All of them are either paper ballot oriented or either centralized voting machine providers.
Do you integrate with like Diebold or Like Diebold or Diebold, I forget how you say it, is like a big provider of voting machines and ATMs in the United States.
Okay, so basically, we didn't work with them, but we hacked their voting machines. You probably heard about it like a year ago. Someone hacked their voting machines in 90 minutes. That was us.
Yeah, Hillary would have won. No, not really.
Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, basically what we can do with these guys is you can keep the front end as a voting machine, and you move the back end to the chain. So basically, people would go. For you guys, you spent like $1 billion to get your voting machine working. I think it won't make sense to ask the US government, even though the voting machines are not safe and they're aware of the fact that the voting machines are not safe. I think it doesn't make sense in terms of budget to ask them to get rid of the voting machines completely. So in that case, what we can do is we keep the voting machine the way it is working, and people can go to the polling station the way they do or they used to do. But actually the entire backend infrastructure is run on a chain. What we did with Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, was in December last year. Basically, these guys, they have voting machines, but more printers. So you click on your favorite, either the political party, either your favorite candidate, and it prints the ballot, and then you wrap it and you put the ballot in the box. Instead of having the voting machines running on one server in Kinshasa, we put the voting machine on an entire decentralized infrastructure, and we put QR codes on the ballots. So that way, because their laws are paper ballot law, and it was I would say really complicated for us to reorganize the laws and the time frame that we had. So we kept the paper ballots. We put QR code on the paper ballots, 2 QR codes, one QR code to identify the ballot and one other QR code to identify each of the 3 different candidates. And so they wrap the ballot, they put the ballot in the box, and when they unwrap the ballot and they check the ballots, we scan them. We scan the QR code of each ballot to make sure that each ballot is unique, and then we scan the QR code of one of the 3, the choice of the voter. But then we put the entire information of the voting machines on a chain instead of having them, running on one server in Kinshasa. And people actually didn't know, but with the QR code and the results of the voting machines, both were running on a chain. So basically, the bottom line here is the approach of having one app, that works from A to Z, where you identify yourself, you vote from your phone. I think it's a good solution, and I think it's definitely the long-term thing that we need to do. But there are ways to get things done easier and quicker, keeping the same infrastructure that we have and keeping the same laws that we have right now. Other questions?
Hi. My question is about the throughput of Ethereum.
Sorry?
The throughput of Ethereum, the network itself. So you're proposing voting systems based on the Ethereum blockchain, correct?
No.
No.
No. It's our own chain.
Okay. So what is your throughput right now? If I had a 1 billion person government, how would you go about proposing a scalability solution where 1 billion people could vote, let's say, in one day?
So we actually have already, we can have more than 100 million people voting on our chain. These type of transactions are different from financial transactions in a way that actually these 100 million people are not voting all in the same time. They're voting, during their election day. So I don't know if you heard about sharding. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So basically, we have like 3 different ways to make sure that we kind of are efficient enough to be able to, I would say, count. Because the important thing is, when the transactions are sent, you have 8 hours to send them. And then the important thing here is when you give the results. Because the more the results take long to be given, the more people could die in some places. So most of the process happen, I would say, afterwards rather than during. So it's a complete different subject, And basically, with the solution that we have, we are quite good with, with dealing with. But you're asking another question, I think, which is why not Ethereum, or why? Yeah, basically, the thing is that would you think that the U.S. government would accept to have Russian non-KYC'd miners providing consensus during their own elections? And even worse, like would you think that Russian government would accept to have U.S. financially incentivized miners providing consensus during their own election? Is it clear what I'm saying? Okay, so basically the consensus mechanism behind Bitcoin or behind Ethereum, behind most of the chains that we have, are financially incentivized, meaning that you're mining coins, and when you mine, the more you mine, the more you have power over the network. So if you have that, and also you have the fact that the nodes are not known, this could lead to have like Russian miners providing consensus during US elections, and they're making money providing consensus. And I think it would make sense for, maybe it would, maybe not, but maybe for Russia it would make sense to pay like few $100 million or $1 billion, and kind of have more to say on the consensus of US election, or vice versa. So instead of building a decentralized app on top of someone else's infrastructure, we built an entire infrastructure from scratch. And the idea was to kind of, solve this issue, which, when you go to a government, even though blockchain is new for them, this is the first question that they ask. Okay, so you're bringing decentralization to my system. How can I make sure that my elections are legit? And this is one of the questions that we need to kind of address. And basically, people don't know, or maybe a lot of people don't know, but actually blockchain doesn't necessarily need coins to provide consensus. You can build blockchain infrastructures, and basically there's no need to have financially incentivized consensus for your infrastructure. So, and I think this makes sense for the purpose of voting. So basically, the entire, I would say most of our budget and most of our time is spent on solving a very deep cryptographic issue, which is governance in blockchain. And governance in blockchain, if it's done correctly, it solves governance, basically. So yeah, that's what we do. You guys have any other question? Do you want to know why blockchain for voting is, do you want to know why voting is a good use case for blockchain? Is this something that you would be interested in? Yeah. Okay, so you know the issues that we have with our voting systems, right? They're like, depending where you have developing areas and you have developed areas, we certainly don't have the same issues. We in Switzerland, for example, vote like 3-4 times a year. We don't vote for someone, we vote for ideas that are brought by certain political parties. And for me, for example, when I vote, I try not to look at the political party, but try to look at the idea, and then I'm like, okay, I voted more left or more right or more center. The issues that we have in our developed, I would say, areas is that young people like us don't necessarily go to vote, are not really interested in voting. And I think if you can have an app on your phone, we're all addicted to our phone. I'm super addicted to my phone. I'm always checking my phone. If you can receive a notification on your phone and you just swipe your phone and you can vote, that's amazing. You can do it from your living room and you don't need to make the queue, and it's really good. Also, in terms of, spending money to move the paper ballots, you have to rent spaces on Sunday, you have to pay people extra hours on Sunday, and that's not necessarily very efficient. And it's really, human errors can change a lot in these type of paper ballot use cases. In developing countries, the issue is even more important because Nigeria, for example, spent like 600 million last year, I think, or 2 years ago, to organize their election. Half of the budget went to security. So they needed to deploy their army, they needed to deploy the police, they needed to empty hospitals, to bring extra nurses, extra doctors to very sensitive areas, because it's very difficult. I mean, it was at least very difficult 2 years ago in Nigeria to have people making the queue 8 hours all together, but they don't necessarily share the same political point of view. Had a use case in Sierra Leone. When we had the use case in Sierra Leone, we gave the results, I think, 15 minutes or half an hour after the end of the first round. It took 3 weeks to the Electoral Commission to give the same results. We were like 0.03% away from each other. These 3 weeks are quite critical, because you can have people who, you know, could die during these 3 weeks because questionable results, and a lot of tension could really, you know, end up quite dramatically in some areas. And it's quite, I would say, I mean, if we think even further, when you can prove to the international community that you're actually fighting the corruption in your country, you can prove that you are, you know, trying to bring more transparency to your voting systems, then also, you know, international investors could be more interested in investing in your different countries, because they know that you're, you know, that you're trying to be more democratic and you're trying to solve these issues, these corruption issues. So you can measure the expenses, definitely in the case of Nigeria, because they really spent a lot of money doing what they needed to do on the security side. But there are also things that we cannot really measure, which is the aura in the international community, and how, you know, how they can feel about your system and your country if you're trying to solve corruption issues. So these are the issues. Now, why blockchain could be a solution? Blockchain by itself is not a solution, in my perspective, because blockchain, it could mean a lot of different things. If you build a D-app on top of Ethereum, that's definitely for me not the solution, because, you know, Ethereum is good for financial inclusion. You know, you're mining, you're making money. It brings the mainstream people to the crypto space. But in terms of governance issues, I don't think that Ethereum was built for the purpose of voting. So saying that blockchain is actually a solution, I think it's more interesting to kind of understand the different implementation of blockchain and try to understand what blockchain means. So yeah, this is what we try to do, and we really try to educate people, not about the business, but really about what blockchain means in terms of governance. Because if it's, you know, if you really don't pay that much attention, you can end up with the exact same solution. You know, if you build a solution with 3 nodes, that's definitely not a blockchain. If you build 1 node in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, 1 node in the Ministry of Defense, and 1 node in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, that's not a blockchain. That's 3 servers run by the government, and that's definitely not a blockchain. There's nothing decentralized and nothing transparent here. So you have to be really, you know, very careful about what blockchain means, and blockchain can be a solution if it's implemented in the right way, in my perspective. I don't know if I answered the question that I asked myself. Do you guys have any other, yeah, sure, yes.
Where are you, sorry?
Thank you. I would like to speak about a little bit the marketing and how the knowledge of blockchain is arriving to the population. No? So in places you've been and you've made general elections for everyone, did you market up to the general people what is blockchain? No, and the question goes in that way, because really in the blockchain industry, what it is difficult is to explain what is blockchain to everyone. No? So understand that when you're doing a use case which implies all the population, it's really a good, really very good opportunity to explain what blockchain is. So did you use that, or how, or at least in the places where people have voted through blockchain, the general knowledge is much up now than it was before, or at least where countries where we didn't touch all the general population, yeah?
Yeah, so we had a few use cases. Some of them were private sector, some of them were for the public sector. We did one election in Sierra Leone, one election in Congo, and a few in Switzerland. And basically what we did is obviously we tried to sell the solution to the electoral commissions. So we had to explain to the electoral commission how that worked, and then the electoral commission need the approval of the government and the different political parties. So obviously we don't come the day before the election. We try to come, there's a public tender, there are, so basically, during that period, what we try to do, we try to get two messages out. First message is it's not gonna change anything in your way of voting, or like the minimum, you don't have to think about what is your private key or how is that gonna be handled or all that, no, because we also had use cases in some, in Congo or in Sierra Leone where, people don't necessarily even speak English. They speak a lot of different languages, and you have to make sure that all of them vote and all of them really understand what's going on. You have deaf people, blind people, and you really have to make, I would say, the barrier as low as possible. But at the same time, we kind of explain to them that now they take control over their own electoral procedures. And when you explain that, they're very excited about it, actually, because that's also something that we try to solve is the turnover, right? And if you can make people really excited about voting, then they're more interested because they know that, their vote could mean something. So we kind of explained to them what is a blockchain explorer, how the nodes work, and how they can check, that their vote was shuffled, and that the vote is in the chain. This is their transaction in the chain. But also they asked a lot of questions. It was really, for us, I think it's not marketing-wise. We don't need to spend much money in voting because it's smooth. Like people really wanna know, and they ask questions. So to answer your question, I think we have to deal more with the request rather than the other way around in this case, because it's a real use case and it's very obvious, So yeah. So for us, this is, it's really not easy because you're working with governments and it really takes time. Some of them are fast moving, some of them are really not fast moving, some of them are not interested, some of them are really interested. But I think it's one of the use cases that should be, I would say, displayed and proposed to the population because it's really obvious. Yeah.
So basically the message was, you guys, now you're going to vote and you're going to have a more secure system, and that's what the general population got.
Yeah, and then basically they ask how am I gonna be able to check my vote, right? And so here you explain that basically if someone gives you money, for example, okay, so we have a phone, I have my phone, I'm voting, and then you come to me and say, okay, I give you. I'm not voting yet. You come to me and say, okay, I give you €5 and I want you to vote for that person. So I can take my phone, I vote in front of you, I can show you, I did my own KYC with my ID, etc., and I vote. And then you go away. Even if you take my phone, I will go and I take her phone and I do the ID again I just need my face. I do the whole ID process again and I can change my vote. So as long as the event is open, you can change your vote. This is something that they really liked because, in some areas, people spend a lot of money to buy other people's votes. And in this case, you have to keep hostage the entire population at 8 p.m. at the end of the election day to be able to get these votes. So this is something. Also, you have like women, for example, or young adults that are living with their dad. In some areas, the dad decides, kind of be like, okay, you guys are gonna vote for these people. So here, for example, you know, women, or they can go to a free space. It can be a women protection NGO, or it can be the Red Cross, or it can be, and you can find one phone. You only need one phone. With one phone, we can all vote. And the other thing that we explain to them is actually they don't need internet. It's like using Shazam, you know. You don't need internet, but then you just have to find a hotspot at some point. You have 8 hours to find the Wi-Fi, and then when you find the Wi-Fi, your vote is sent to the chain. So they understood how they try to understand how this could help them, and then they were like, okay, so now how can I verify my vote? And you go on the Explorer, and the Explorer is independent from the Electoral Commission, you know, because it's a chain. You know, we can organize 5, 6 different elections at the same time. So you go check, you have your key, you have your transaction, you can go, you find your transaction there, and you have the decryption of your transaction. You can make sure that your transaction is exactly what you sent. So yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, I also think that blockchain as is not the solution for voting. Blockchain, it was not designed for vote, but similar solutions could be. So you said that you have your own blockchain in order to provide solutions for voting. And my question is, which type of consensus do you have for voting, not based on coins, because it's not necessary? And also, which technology runs this blockchain and how you implement it?
So the chain is the research of the Decentralized and Distributed System Lab of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, and it's not a fork from any other chain. How the consensus works, so the name of the consensus is proof of sign. You can go on our website and kind of read the yellow papers and white papers and whatnot. But basically, the idea is that the nodes are distributed in not-for-profit. So it can be government organization or non-government organization. It can be like UN type of organizations or the Red Cross or Médecins Sans Frontières, like tier 1 organization. And these organizations, they are equal to each other. So it's based on the digital signatures of all the nodes. You have an Oracle node. You can go check. I'm not going to go deeply. Yeah. But basically, all these nodes are equal to each other, and there's no way for one of the nodes to take power over the other nodes, and there's no money involved. We can give them money afterwards, because they're not for profit, and I think it's good to, yeah, but that happened after the consensus. We have now something like 255 nodes. 90% of them are ready to organize an election. They're selected randomly. So until the election day, everyone is ready. And the election day, you will know which of these nodes will provide consensus. And the Oracle node, which here in our case has a more important role, is also every 10 minutes or every hour or every 30 minutes will change. And this is something that's also done randomly, basically. So yes, and there is no way for them to overtake each other. And that's it, basically. Yeah?
Another question. Also, you said that it will be very good to vote through your phone. But you said also that the solutions you are providing, they are based on the voting machines. I think they are locally installed somewhere. So which is the next step to move from these voting machines to a phone application and to make this voting fully decentralized?
The next step will be the willing of the government, to be honest. For us, we're ready, and we decided to do it this way because we think that, I mean, I don't want to spend millions of dollars lobbying in the parliament trying to sell the voting solution with the phone, and maybe some countries are not ready for that yet, you know. So the willing of the government, the infrastructure, in Switzerland or here in Catalonia, we can vote with our phone. You have 3G, 4G, 5G soon everywhere, and that's really not an issue. You have very efficient KYC providers who can help you to identify yourself. You can even have voice recognition and fingerprint recognition. In some areas, it's more difficult. It's more difficult for different reasons, for education reasons, for access reasons, and also for the laws. Like in some countries, in Congo, for example, there was no way they would have accepted digital laws. Even if they had voting machines, the laws were paper ballot law, and what made sense for them and the results was the paper ballot. So basically, I would say we are ready. It depends on when the population will be ready and when the governments will be ready to move forward. And we really wanted to do it this way because we really wanted to have blockchain voting now, not blockchain voting in 50 or 20 years, you know. So yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's all we've got time for.
I think there was like one last question there.
Okay.
And
One more.
I would like to ask about the costs, because at the end, you will have people that could be not interested in going through that way. So at the end, the government has to have the same structure for the people that don't want to vote through the phone. So it could be that you have the structure about the people that wants to go through the phone, and also for the people who wants to do it physically, because maybe we can have, everyone more or less can have access to a phone, but people could be not interested in doing it through that way.
yeah, so the question was how expensive it is, or?
So if it could create more cost from the government in that because you need also to have the infrastructure for the people that may not be interested in voting through phone.
Okay, so usually it's less expensive because usually, you know, if you choose the A to Z system, you know, you don't have to deploy the army anymore. You don't have to move your material all over the country. And the answer to your question is that you have always someone who is willing to pay extra money, even if it's like 500K or $1 million more, to have more transparent election. And for us, we had no issue whatsoever to find funding for the extra 500K. For example, in the case of the Congo, yeah, people went to vote exactly the same, right? But this is what we did. We went to the former president of Congo, who actually lost the election. I mean, his political party lost this presidential election last year. Okay. We went to him and we were telling him, listen, like, you have been in power for like more than 12 years now. And you're not doing business with Europe anymore. You're not doing business with the US anymore. You didn't even give visas to international observers, not even to the African Union. Your only people that you're working with is China. And they're coming to observe your election, but I mean, come on, China is not, is not the best observer for democracy, you know? So he thought about it and he was like, even if I win the election, because we went to him and we were like, you don't need to cheat, right? Because you are going to win and you don't need to do that. And he was basically saying, he was thinking that even if he wins the election and has 49% of his people, or 48 or 30% of his people, even 1% of his people, who are not happy with the outcome of the election because they think that the results are not the real results, it's really difficult. He has been in that case for 12 years. The country is very unstable and unhappy. So even for him to keep on being in power, it was better for him to make sure that his people were happier with the outcome of the election. So, okay. I mean, UK aid, US aid, European Union, private people, all of them called us, said, how much money you need? We want to help you. But even he paid the 500 more because he was thinking about it, and strategically it was better for him to pay the 500K more, to print these stupid QR codes and to just link the voting machine to a decentralized system rather than having a riot of 2 years after the election having people dying and have all the international community who is already unhappy with what's going on in Congo who would be more unhappy. So finding budget for organizing more transparent elections, it's really the last issue.
Okay, yeah.
Thanks everyone. I hope it was helpful. Thank you.